Hey, so this video is going to be addressing Whatifalthist's recent video called Another 12 Lies About Reality, for which I attached the link to below. I don't have all of the stuff I wanted to do to make this reaction video right yet, because I am pretty busy with my job right now. But I will soon, but for now, I can just address a few things that he said in this video. I'm going to be addressing only 3 of his 12 points to keep it concise. So let's get into it. What caught my attention immediately about this video was one of the very first things he had in it, where he had the 4 horsemen atheists, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris, and he compared them to an emo punk rock band, I think is what he called them, and he said they were the left-wing nerd brigade, which I don't even know that Hitchens was what you'd call a pure liberal, but anyways, that made me laugh in kind of a painful way when I heard that. So I decided I would don my emo punk makeup, or whatever you want to call it. Also, he talked about Nietzsche and nihilism in this a fair amount, so I thought that was another good reason to go ahead and practice. Also, I'm going to Comic-Con in 2 weeks, so I got to kind of brush up a little bit. So a number of reasons I'm wearing the Joker makeup in this. But all that set aside, this video, he did what Whatifalthist tends to do the most, and that is he did say a lot of truth and say a lot of things I agree with, but also twisting a lot of it to fit his narrative. And the biggest one he did right off at the beginning, which is where he said that atheists try to portray human nature as a completely selfish thing, and that we are the ones who say that humans are inherently selfish. Well, that is just honestly false, and not even in any way. I mean, a truth, because Christianity, by doctrine, says human nature is sinful and we must have Jesus' forgiveness to forgive us our sins. And Christianity is the one that really villainizes selfishness, or they have to have certain contexts in which selfishness must be justified in order to be okay. Like, if you're making a lot of money, you have to give a certain amount of it to your church in order for it to be okay. Now then your selfishness is fine. Or if you want to date a really hot girl in your church, you can't say that you actually just think she's attractive and that's why you want to date her, and that you like her personality and looks both as a mix. No, you have to pretend that her personality is everything and the looks mean absolutely nothing. So you make up this BS about how it's just because she's such a good godly woman or whatever. And I can assure you from being in it my whole life, that is the way it works within the church. People are not honest about anything because they have to put up this facade of righteousness. Whereas with atheists, they would actually just say that some selfishness is just a natural part of human behavior and should be accepted just as long as it's within the right context. At least that's what I would say. For instance, dating based off attractiveness for either men or women. Now, I do not think you should ever make physical attraction the sole reason that you want to go out with someone or date them or whatever. However, there's nothing wrong with it being part of it, and that goes for either men or women. Physical attraction is a part of life, but making it the sole focus of what you do is probably just as much of a mistake as ignoring it entirely, and that's the reason we try to tell people to not focus on looks. Also, as far as your pay goes, I work for a bank. I understand the whole thing about how some people are selfish and just want to step on others for a higher pay grade, and that is obviously a bad thing for atheists or Christians. I do not see pure financial gain as a good thing. Very much the opposite. I know the limitations of money from my years of being trained as a finance and accounting major, and why you don't want it to be too big of a priority in your life. But that being said, trying to make a profit and trying to make it part of your life is just flat out stupid. That's not selfish. That's just being smart, and to some degree there is some trade-off where that level of selfishness can be productive for others. So there was the fundamental premise of what he said here was wrong, more so than just about anything else, and that's why I wanted to address this more than anything. He even brought up Nietzsche when he talked about this, and said how Nietzsche, he mentioned what Nietzsche had mentioned about how the Roman Empire was not pure evil, and in many ways it was the most advanced civilization of the time and did a lot of good things for the lands that it conquered, and that is true. Nietzsche did believe that, and he believed that between Judea and Rome, that Judea was the one that was the more evil of the two, and of course we can see who won. Look at who controls Rome these days, the Roman Catholic Church. So, Nietzsche was making the point that the Roman virtues had been trumped by the Judean virtues of the time, and that's why also people think Nietzsche was anti-Semitic, but I don't want to get into all that now. I don't want to get off on tangents. because what I'm mostly just focusing on is Whatifalthist and his videos. This isn't super intensive about Nietzsche. But basically, just to sum up, where I disagree with him on this, I do believe some forms of selfishness are very destructive. Don't get me wrong, in any facet of life. However, the problem lies with trying to portray all selfishness that the church does not deem acceptable as bad. Now, that is what Christians do, and that is what atheists are trying to argue against. So, moving on to the next one, he wanted to do the next lie about reality, he said, was that the subjective does not exist and judging is always bad. Well, I don't really understand what he means by this. He's a champion of objective reality, Whatifalthist is, and thinks that, objective moral standards and meanings in life are very important, and that's the great triumph of Western society. So this doesn't really mesh well and make a whole lot of sense with it. In fact, if anything, he kind of champions subjectivity and says that, we need to have standards. Like, he uses a bunch of examples saying, that the Western societies have descended into nihilism, don't have standards, we just listen to mumble rap instead of good music, we don't appreciate true art. And, I can agree with the music one a little bit, because I'm not a big fan of rap, but still, some people are, and I recognize that everybody's got their, preferences. But, on a more serious level, sorry, I just had to quickly look at my note cards to remember what he was saying. I don't get why, let me put it this way, I don't disagree with him. I agree that within subjective moral or existential standards, there is definitely different tiers of what is and is not acceptable. I mean, just because something is, let me, define to you quickly objective versus subjective. Objective, as defined by the Bible and as defined by many in the Christian world, means it's an unalterable and inescapable truth that is something that cannot be changed and must be almost absolutely respected. That is what I see as an objective truth, and maybe others see it as different. Subjective means it could be very, 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 it is a very good idea, it could be a very bad idea, it could be a standard that almost everybody adheres to, such as that Nazism is evil. That is something I believe is subjectively one of the most evil things out there, but not objectively. Not in the sense that Christianity and Islam portray objective and subjective truths, and where they try to say something is an inalterable and inescapable truth. And I think some people misunderstand, the difference between these, and to be honest with you, I somewhat have still a crude understanding of them because I'm not a philosophy major. However, I do understand from having come from a very religious background the overall, idea of what an objective standard or an existential standard is. And, one interesting comparison he makes in this is he compares India and China, and he talks about how China developed at a much faster rate than India did over the course of some period of history, and it was largely because of the religions of those countries. Well, and of course those religions at the time would be Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, and Confucianism. And of course India would be Hinduism. Well, I don't disagree with him entirely. I mean, I think, but those are all secular religions. In fact, that's one reason why Eastern Asia tends to have very little conflict between religion and its more secular ways of thinking. Like, Japan, despite not having any real revolution or anything, just instantly became pretty secular and backed away from Shintoism, because Shintoism is by nature a pretty secular religion. As is in Confucianism and Taoism are really kind of more forms of philosophy than they are religions. So of course, I do believe these are more advanced than Hinduism, and probably did contribute to Eastern Asia advancing at a faster rate. Now again, I don't mean that as a slap in the face to Hindus in India. I'm sure, I have never had a lot of specific problems with those religions because I don't live in India, and I don't believe Hinduism is any worse than Christianity or Islam, but I don't necessarily believe that it's better. And then addressing the last lie about reality that he mentioned here, for time's sake I'm not going to be addressing any others, was that religion and science are at odds. Well, this is another one where he's just flat wrong. At least mostly. Okay, I'll take that back. Mostly he is wrong. Because religion and science are not entirely at odds. You can be a scientist and be a Christian, Muslim, whatever. But as someone who was taught intelligent design growing up my whole life, and our teacher, if she ever mentioned evolution, would have been fired, I can assure you there's a little bit of conflict between science and religion. Okay, I mean, because, you know, if evolution is true, then that somewhat does diffuse the whole idea that the world was designed by a god, because it shows that a lot of it came about more by chance than by design, which of course intelligent design argues for the fact that, you know, the complexity of the universe necessitates that there had to be an intelligent designer, and thus a god. Well, you know, but here's where I do agree with Whatifalthist a little on this, though. Neil deGrasse Tyson once kind of addressed this, and he said, you know, like, most scientists tend to be more secular, but we're not necessarily like the hardcore atheists that are out, you know, pushing against religion. He's like, that's more the philosophy crowd. And I agree with him. You know, Nietzsche, when he did his books against religion, it really wasn't a scientific takedown of the belief in a god. It was more of a philosophical rant against the principles of Christianity and a lot of established principles of time, as well as lamenting the struggles ahead for humanity to adapt to new morals and new standards. So I kind of understand what he means here. They're not 100% at odds, but it's going too far to say that they're never at odds. Because, you know, I mean, sorry, I just got to reference my note cards one more time. Well, I mean, like, one thing he also mentions here when he tries to compare the two is that he has like a graph comparing the statistics of religious people amongst scientists and religion amongst non-scientists, and shows that there are many scientists who are identified by different religious ways of thinking, and that's not totally false, you know. I mean, but let me put it this way, just because they identify under a certain religion doesn't mean they're necessarily religious, you know. A lot of people just call themselves a different religious denomination or affiliation because they don't want to deal with the stress of having to be an atheist and having to be attacked for willfully abstaining from it. So, you know, there's a lot of things missing from his video as usual, and a lot of things that he misrepresents, but I hope that I did a good job of addressing them relatively quickly and concisely here, and I hope, you know, that most people watch this agreed, but if you don't, feel free to say so in the comment section below. But other than that, just thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.